A warm welcome to each of you joining us here tonight. My name is Daisy Machado, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Hispanic Scholars Program, a program in Latin theological education for seminarians in master's level programs all around the United States and Puerto Rico. The HSP just celebrated its 35th anniversary in June of this last year, and among one of our newer programs is the one that all of you are a part of tonight, which we call the HSP Exchange, which we started 3 years ago. The goal and the focus of the exchange was to share with as many people as possible ideas and the research, publications, and pedagogy that was being done by many of the talented faculty who teach in our annual summer sessions held each June. But in 2025, we shifted the focus of the exchange in order to create a platform to tell the stories of lucha, the stories of esperanza, resistencia, fe, perseverancia, as shared with us by one talented and unique Latina, beginning tonight and continuing on the last Tuesday of every month until we conclude the series in May. Each of the women that you will meet each month will also represent a faith tradition. For tonight, for example, we're looking at from the Evangelical perspective, providing us with yet another connection and a specific context as we listen to these women weave their stories. This series is being called Feminista Chat. Feminista because I want to lift up our belief in the social, economic, and political equality of women. And chat because this is a conversation between two friends, which you just happen to be eavesdropping on. This is a personal conversation, but it is an embodied conversation in that we are two live humans who happen to be women who are sharing the experiences of our journey as leaders within particular faith tradition. There's nothing abstract about these conversations. This is about us and for us, as we Latinas who daily must face the innumerable obstacles and hurdles that are part and parcel of being not just brown and female in the 21st century United States, but whose community is right now at this moment under siege as the federal government launches an aggressive and violent anti-immigrant attack that has left fear, pain, and insecurity in its wake. And sadly, I fear this is just the beginning of what may be a most cruel and brutal year for nuestra gente. This is why I feel that the HSP Exchange is so timely, because the stories that you will hear beginning tonight are about how to engage in la lucha, about how not to give up, about how to strategize, and how not to lose hope. Tonight, I hope that in the conversation that you will hear, you will understand more clearly why we must work in conjunto and why we need one another, since no one can journey alone. So join me in saying hello to the Reverend Liz Rios. Bienvenida, Liz. How great to have you join me tonight as we chat and we get to know one another. We're just going to hang out a little bit. So, si tiene cafecito, that's always welcome.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. On your website, Liz, you describe yourself as an Afro-Boricua, born in Brooklyn, New York, raised on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the Jacob Riis Public Housing. As a fellow New Yorker, we called them the projects, huh?
Projects.
The projects. Liz has a BA in liberal arts, an MA in management, an EDD in organizational leadership, a DMIN, and in May of 2025, she's going to complete her MA in social justice from Union Theological Seminary, my alma mater, which is exciting. But there's more. In 2022, she received a Multicultural Excellence Award from City to City Miami. In 2023, Liz was inducted into the prestigious Martin Luther King Jr. College of Ministers and Laity Board of Preachers. Vaya, Liz, felicidades, chica. Gracias. A lot of good work. And orgullo, we're so proud.
Thank you so much.
And there is much to celebrate, indeed. But that's the public Liz Rios. The private Liz Rios is the eldest of two sisters. One is a half-sister. She's the daughter of Maria Laguna Felix from Naguabo, Puerto Rico, and Eliezer Delgado from Juncos, Puerto Rico. And when I asked Liz to tell me what she wanted folks to know about her, this is what she said. Tell them that I am just a girl from the hood, raised by a single mom who beat the predicted stats because the church gave me a vision for my life. And that I'm just trying to be faithful, not famous. And that the most important things to me are my husband, Hiram, of 35 years, my only living son, Samuel Eliu, 27. I had a son die 3 years ago, Daniel Jeremiah, DJ. And if you mess with them, you better be ready for me. Liz, tell me a little bit about your childhood and growing up with a single mom. Tell me what you learned from your mom about la lucha and about how to navigate life in the hood.
Well, when I understood that I was in the hood and I understood what she was going through, I grew up, like you mentioned, a single parent. I had to learn how to cook at 11 years old because I had to cook for my sister because my mom would go from one job, come home, see if we were okay, and then go to the other job. I always learned, that hustle. You have to grind, to make sure that you put food on the table. And la brega was for real in my house.
Yeah.
So I never knew a life that wasn't working hard and trying to survive, but I never saw my mom give up. I never saw her even really cry in front of me. I learned later on that there was many times that she did. She just didn't want us to see it. But it was an interesting, childhood. And, I just learned that I had to, step it up, because I had to, as the older daughter, I had to take care of my younger sister.
Yeah. What was it about the strength of a woman that I think there's something about that we our mothers, any woman who has to leave her country and migrates, all of that, it's just there's such an amount of readjustments and recreating, right? You leave your homeland, but you recreate home. You leave your family, but you recreate family. You leave your friends, but you recreate friendships. What did you learn about that from your mom?
I think I learned what I've actually been practicing in my life. You're always going to have various iterations of yourself. You have to allow the spirit to help you reimagine what your life is going to be like, because as we are seeing right now, life throws you curveballs and sometimes you don't see it coming. And you have to be able to pick up where that left you and do something different. And so with my mom, and really with my tias and my comadres, all of them around strong women, strong Latina women, they would tell me all the time, to get my education because, and again, because she was a single mom, she would tell me, don't depend on a man. Make sure that you have an education because if they do walk away, you have something to walk away with. And so to me, she was various different women throughout my lifetime. And I think we have to learn to be okay with that because we get one image of what a woman should be or what a evangelical Christian woman should be. And we think when we are not that, then God can't use us. And my gosh, I am definitely not the person I used to be. And I thank God for that. And I was able to accept that because I saw that the women that were able to do that around my life, my mom and others, they just kept it moving. And I think that's something that we have to learn how to do.
Yeah, I think it's really important what you're saying about this idea that we're not the same people all the time. We have to grow. I mean, it's like if that doesn't happen, then if I were the same Daisy that I was back in 1982, what's the point, right? I have to be somebody else. What about this idea of recreation for me is interesting because that's exactly what you're saying. Your mother was three different women to you. What does that tell you about the work that has to be done in terms of future generations?
I just think that, this happens in the church and I don't know why, but sometimes we just stop having an imagination. We're given a picture of what things are supposed to look like. And sometimes those pictures that are given to us they're given to us by people that don't even know us, that don't even know our community. And we have to be able to sit back and look and say, wait a minute, that doesn't define me. And then be able to get up and redefine yourself. I mentioned that Ada Maria Sacidia, she talks about how, I name myself,
Right.
I think that's a really important thing for us that we don't have to let other people label us and accept those labels. I wrote a book about don't buy the lie, because we end up buying the lie, and we're actually in the state that we're in right now in the United States because a lot of people did buy the lie.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that I think sometimes we're afraid, right? There's like this element of fear that we have to deal with in terms of, fear of not being accepted. I think that that's something that we struggle with as women also, don't you think?
Oh yeah. I mean, who doesn't want to be liked? I think that's the most important thing, right? That we have to be honest. We all want to be liked. I want the people that are watching today to say, "Hey, Liz is a cool chick," you know. But but at the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself, right? To thy own self be true. And God has wired us very differently, and we have to be able to tap into what that is and then say, okay, this is how I'm going to live my life,
Mhm.
but not contort yourself into boxes that you were never meant to fit in. And a lot of us do that until something, I believe, in my personal life, something makes you crash into Calvary, and esos cantazos de la vida,
Right, right.
those hard hits on the wall really wake you up, and something happens. You either walk away from God or you lean into it, and you're like, okay, God, so the person that I was developing into was apparently not where you want me to be now, so who am I
Mm,
developing into? So we have these stages of evolving, and I
yeah.
think that's important because those crisis times are the ones that for me personally, have made me kind of evolve into Liz 6.0.
And I think that this idea of evolving in certain ways it's scary, but it's also exciting, right? Because I mean, that means that we can be right. It's just it's exciting to think about the possibilities of that. I think that there's something about that that's God's gift. I think, right? The idea that we can just be wonderful, we can be new, we can be all kinds of different things that we didn't imagine. I wanted to be a translator when I was little. I wanted to travel, and I went to the United Nations when I was 8, and I thought I wanted to be a translator and look, and I am. I've become a translator in such a way that I never thought I would ever be because I was able to do that. So I think you're right. You're right on target of that. But let's talk a little bit about these cantazos that come times in our lives, right? At these moments. Let's talk a little bit about love and partnership. Sometimes we don't get a chance to talk about that in our lives. And here you have 35 years with Hiram. Someone would say, que aguante. That's a lot of love or a lot of patience, right? How does that relationship feed or how does it anchor the work that you do?
Oh, I'm so glad you're talking about that and asking me about that question because it doesn't come up a lot, and it's so important because I always say that the person that I am and all the accolades that I've been able to achieve was because I had him by my side. I always tell him, and my degrees are his degrees, and he's the wind beneath my wings and all that stuff. And I know that might be corny for some folk, but I'm a little corny. And I really believe that if people like each other, if they develop a friendship, like Hiram and I met in church. We were teenagers when we met. We were in the same church for many years, and that's where we, dated, got married, had our kids, and things like that. Which again, that's not something you see a lot in a lot of the faith journeys of a lot of people because there's so much moving around. But I feel like he's been very supportive. Latino, puertorriqueño, jíbaro, uh, he's Christian, but he has never been intimidated by me or
Mhm.
my ambitions. And that is such an important thing. And you get those hints when you're dating. So for any woman that's young and thinking about dating or whatever, don't ignore the flags. The flags are there for a reason.
They
So
sure are.
right, so if they're already giving you a little bit of heat or whatever for going out to speak or doing this or doing that or getting an education, check that because that may not be the best partner for you going forward. And that's why
Mhm.
I've been with him for 37 years.
Wow.
1 year dating, 1 year engaged, and then 35 years married this May.
Wow. That's really cool. I mean, I think it's sometimes we don't think about that and we don't talk about that privately. And sometimes we go as women with a lot of silence about those moments of our lives, right? Where we're looking and the idea of being alone or there's so many things that like again, it goes back to what you were saying about these pictures that are painted for us about this is what a marriage is, this is what it looks like, this is what a relationship. And it doesn't have to be that way. And, we have to find those ways for ourselves. And how do we do that? And I think that that's why I wanted to ask you, because I think that not everyone gets married, not all marriages last, but when marriages do, I think we have to also talk about that. What is
Yeah.
it that makes those successful?
Well, I think for us, it's been that we go with the flow of the seasons that we're in. So there's been times when I was working and he wasn't, and he was taking care of the kids, and there was times when he was working and I was home homeschooling my son. So like we've never had the gender roles that society told us that we were supposed to play. We discussed like what's best for our family. Porque ellos no pagan la renta as our parents told many of us. So, we did what was best for our family. So our roles flip flop throughout the years, and while some people may have thought or had an opinion about it, for us, it didn't matter. We felt that it was important for us to do what was best for our kids. And I had a special needs child before he passed away, and there was a lot of medical things that we needed to address, and so we did what we needed to do, and that was what worked. And I think marriages need to learn how to ignore the voices, because everybody got an opinion. Everybody got an opinion. So, we have to learn how to, quiet those voices out there and say, okay, Lord, who is it that I need to listen to? And in addition to, of course, his voice, because sometimes we let too many people in the marriage, and there's only supposed to be two.
Yeah. And sometimes, the evangelical, like the role of women, so I grew up in Assemblies of God Church. You and I share that.
Yeah.
The role of women is submissive and stuff. And I think that sometimes, I don't know, I've never thought that that's what God wanted me to be. You know what I mean? It just never occurred to me. Even though the pastor would say it, I thought, it doesn't make sense to me that God would want me to be that way. And, how do we kind of be able to find that within ourselves, the truth of who we are, despite where the pulpit, because sometimes our pulpits are corrupt, and we don't want to talk about that either. Our pulpits are not only machista pulpits, but they're corrupt pulpits that have lost their way. And you talk about when you wrote, when you and I were talking about tonight, you wrote about straying, right? That we stray from the truth. And how is it then that we can, as women, really be able to kind of find the truth of who we are without feeling, because sometimes the guilt, you have to be this way, you have to aguantar abuso, all these kinds of things that are complicated, right? We don't, and I don't want to detract into that, but I think that what you're saying about listening to God's voice in your context, that's why these conversations for me have to be embodied. They have to be embodied in your truth, because it's your story. And then how do we listen to it? Do you have any sense of why you were able to kind of do that and not be burdened or overburdened with, let's say, this kind of I don't know, boring, oppressive, evangelical idea of what marriage is and the gender roles that we're supposed to have?
Well, I think you mentioned it too. I never thought of myself being, this, Lizzie homemaker, let me have everything done. Not that I thought anything was bad with it, but I always was a leader. I always was metida en cosa, and
Right.
I felt like in my mind, I didn't even think of myself in that picture. And when I was dating my husband, he knew what he was getting. Now we got a much better marriage than we imagined, you know, but because you never imagine the things that are going to happen, the good, the bad, or the ugly. But I think it just he saw me as a leader, and I already saw myself as one, because at 11 years old, the person who became my sister-in-law, she saw leadership in me and gave me an opportunity. And that moment is what cemented for me that, you know what, I can be a leader. And I was 11 years old. Now, I didn't know how far God was going to take me or whatever, but I just knew I could do something. I could make a difference, and I could contribute. But we have to learn how to look at the things that how God is talking to us, and the desires that we have. They're there for a reason. He put them there for a reason. So we can't, put them to the side and say, let me just do what these people are telling us to do. Now, I say that knowing that it took me, I was 32 before I was like super aware of all these things,
Right.
And so to me, like I said, I think it was, going through hard times, and realizing that a lot of the things that I was told by people, they weren't even practicing themselves, you know.
Right, right.
And we already see that as well in the faith community. But I started to pay attention to the things that was like screaming inside of me, and I started to look for that. And I think from there, that hunger to learn more that I was not getting in the bubble that I was in,
Right, right.
I started searching. And that's really important for women to kind of like get out of their denominational bubble, get out of their
Right.
even their friendship bubble, because your 4 friends don't know everything and can't be everything for you. And neither can your husband or your boyfriend. You have to have all these different baskets full so that you can get the best that's available in life.
And I think you just pointed, I'm just going to mention it briefly because I think it's important. This person who you could say your sister will become your sister-in-law, who saw and gave you an opportunity for leadership, how important mentoring is, and how important we as women need to take mentoring of other women and younger women and young girls.
Yeah.
Because we don't know, like you're saying, the yearnings inside of somebody's heart. I think about the people who opened up doors for me, and I was just about 12, 11, around that same age, because I wanted to do stuff. I didn't know what the stuff was. But when people began to open up doors, I began to say, this is stuff I like, this one I'm not so good at. So this is how you begin to define yourself. Let me go back to something you talked about. You talked about the issues of loss. And I want to talk about loss because loss is very real for us, Nuestra Gente. We're a community that faces loss constantly in all kinds of ways. And you faced the loss of a child, which is just the most incredible thing. Tell me a little bit about DJ.
DJ, he's back here. You see his picture all over here. He was my son that was born early. He was born at 26 weeks. And I had just come from a retreat where the theme was "But God." And when I came back from the retreat, he decided, I was already living in Florida, and he decided that he wanted to be a New Yorker. And so, just like everybody else in the family, so he came at 26 weeks. He was the micro preemie, as they're called. And the first 2 years of his life was really challenging. They really told us that they didn't know how he was going to continue on. They didn't even expect him to live as long as he did. But I called him my silent prophet, because I felt like God really spoke to our family through this child who didn't even speak. He was always happy, always content. Came through, he had 30 surgeries in his life, and came through each one of them with a smile, with a little crooked smile. He would come out of the OR. And it was just like a testament to us, like, we got a war on, be the warriors that God wants us to be, because we're gonna take cantazos. I think there's this thing that in our the faith spaces about triumphalism, and that we're always victorious. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes we do lose. Sometimes we are hit, and sometimes we stay down for a little bit. But the thing is that we can get back up, because
Right.
our losses and our hard moments don't define us, and they don't tell us that we have to stay stuck. And I think that's where people are. And DJ for me was always that reminder, that visible reminder that we can get back up, and that I don't need to have anybody prophesy to me or give me a prophetic word or whatever, because even in the silence, God speaks. And he was that for me and for our family.
How were you able to move on from that loss? What were some of the things, the strategies?
Doctora, I'm still dealing with it. It's still fresh. My husband and I, we could be like in the kitchen eating or doing cleaning up, and we'll just start crying, because grief is not linear, right? And
That's right. That's right.
it comes in waves. But we're able to smile now, just knowing that we were the blessed ones. When we first had him, people felt sorry for us, and they were like, "Oh my God, you have a special needs child." But you know what? He was the blessing to us, and we learned so much from him. So we just kind of like take it day by day. We've learned to embrace it when the wave come. We don't even try to hide it. We could be in a restaurant, and this has happened many times. We start both crying, and we joke around afterwards saying, these people probably think we're breaking up or something in the restaurant. but we are plegando, because we're remembering our beautiful boy. But we just feel that his lessons continues. We actually started a foundation in his name, so that every year we give back to a special needs nonprofit, and also to a church that has a focus on special needs families and children.
Wow. Yeah. What a way to take a loss and make it a blessing for so many others. That's remarkable. It's very touching. This idea of a silent prophet, very powerful, Liz. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's not an easy share. I asked you, Liz, to share with me 3 things that you really wanted folks to know, and I'm just going to read them out, but then we're going to take them one by one. The first one, you said you want people to really know, I'm an advocate for justice and inclusion in faith spaces. The second thing you said, I am not about bending the knee to anyone, even if it costs me. And I have to tell you, I had to do a happy dance when I read that. I said, Santo, that's it. And then the third one I really loved. You said, I am in love with Bad Bunny's latest album. I said, that's right. That's it. So let's go. Let's kind of break these up so we can get to know you a little bit better. Tell me about the work that you're doing and what you're passionate about. I know you're doing you have the work that your passion to plant, right? You're working with that, mentoring of women through the years. Tell me a little bit about the work that you're passionate about.
Yeah, well, I am passionate about women in leadership. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't lead. God didn't put a lid on it, so they can't either. And if you're in spaces where that's happening, I feel you should, reevaluate. And I feel like justice is an important thing. It's a God idea. It's not a political platform. I don't know why people get triggered by it. And that is really important to me, that people, the church is supposed to be the place where people feel the safest, and it's not. And so how can we create these spaces that are inclusive, that see everybody? Everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to be valued, right? And so our churches, and not all, there's some places that are beautiful and they're doing really great things, but the ones that I've been seeing that are doing that are churches that are not afraid to mix it up a little bit and not be traditional. I think, as a church planter trainer in Passion to Plant, I train people who are global voices, global majority leaders to plant justice-oriented, holistic churches. Because I feel that if we had more justice-oriented churches, we wouldn't have what we're having right now in our country.
Yeah.
People just haven't been discipled. People just never were told history. And they haven't been told that the church historically has been complicit with a lot of this stuff. And so a lot of our people, just kind of parroted what they learned. They didn't know. But now there's spaces where you can learn, about it. And there's technology, there's books, and there's so many other ways. So I do that. I also, have my day job, which is working as a director of Pulpito Fellows, where we're training faith leaders that are interested, already have, the preaching platforms or teaching platforms, to use technology to share a justice-oriented gospel message. So we give them training on theology, technology, and being able to understand this whole social media world. So I do that as well. And again, from a justice-oriented lens. So the justice is like the umbrella of all that I do. And then I have the Passion Center, which is something that, I've been in church ministry for a long time, been a pastor, been a executive pastor. And before COVID, I started the Passion Center in this way to be online because, this Sunday, I went to a fellow planter's closing service. And I know what that feels like, to have to close because it's just too much money to have a building, to have, and if you are committed to the poor. When I was a executive pastor, I actually worked with a pastor who actually told us that he didn't want to work with the poor because they don't tithe. And obviously I didn't last long there. But that is the thinking that a lot of people do. Like, if you are committed to these things and to these people, you're probably not going to get ahead as much. So to me, I try to not have my ties and be tethered to people or places or thinking that tells me that I cannot create these spaces for women or for all people to flourish.
And that goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, right? That we have these pictures that are given to us about this is what your life is like. The same thing, this is what success in ministry is like. I remember we did, my husband and I did 2 new church starts. We planted 2 new churches for the Christian Church Disciples. One was in Houston, the other one was in Fort Worth. And I remember, people telling us, why do you want to work with, the undocumented folks that, they're not even there. They could be gone. Like you're not being successful. Why did you go to a white, you speak English, you can, and these pictures that people wanted to give me went in my heart. I knew that's not me. That's not who I wanted to be. And this idea of, again, being true to yourself and understanding your calling and what it is that you're called to be. And this idea of not being tethered to buildings is a big one. I know how much, you want to have a church building, but it becomes a burden that you can't keep up.
Burden for us, like in a lot of the church planting networks, they basically tell you have to have this much money in the bank, you have to have this amount of people on your launch team. But all those things don't work for our community. And
That's
so
right.
a lot of people, they count themselves out from what God may be telling them to do because they can't check the boxes that these Western style church planting networks have told them. And it's not that they're not giving good information, because they give good information. They just don't give you all the information. For instance, they talk about vision. They talk about getting your team together. They talk about budgets, very necessary for operating a church. But they don't talk about what's happening on the ground. And they don't talk about the things that we need to know, the history, so that we can exegete our community well. And so they come in, they parachute into communities, and they're like, hey, we're the savior. And that's not the case. And our people definitely don't like that. They are more into, comunidad and having relationship and not necessarily functioning on time. They want to be able to, let's have that cafecito, voy a comer contigo, for dinner or something. And developing those relationships. And a lot of the networks that I've dealt with, they're really run, about 90% of the church planting networks are run by white males. So they just, this is not on their radar. This is not something that is important to them. And even when they try to learn, because they are those that try to learn, it causes them to be a little impatient, because we don't run as people of color. We just don't run on the capitalist timeline that a lot of them do.
Right. And it goes back to people having to recreate. You have to recreate community. You have to, so you can't be running like that. That's not how the heart or even how your sense of self functions. So that's very true. Let me go to this one, because it's exactly what you were saying about these folks that you say that are in charge of, tend to be more white males. You talk about, I am not about bending the knee to anyone, even if it costs them. And then you wrote, in these evangelical spaces, and especially in my work in church planting, gatekeepers are 99.9% white men, and most of them haven't really welcomed me. How do we, as women, Latina women, as Latinas, how do we, I've experienced that having done church starts. How do we say, hey, you know what? Nah, this is not the way it's done. This is not. What were your strategies? What were some strategies that you put into practice?
Well, again, it took me a while to get here, but I'm hoping that the young ones on the Zoom today can learn from this, so you don't have to wait until you're my age to learn from these things. But I feel too, like, again, what we said, be okay reimagining what it looks like in your particular context. And so, you may just gather people in your living room, or in somebody's kitchen or whatever. It doesn't have to be what we have always been told is church, because church doesn't have to be in a building. It's the people. If we go back to the scriptures and we understand what that means, it changes everything. But what happens is we're not really looking at the scriptures. We're looking at the word of man, and we're looking at what they say is successful. And so you have to be able to reimagine, and you have to be okay with not getting the approval. Why is it that we're always shape-shifting to fit into spaces that we probably weren't even called to?
That's right.
You know what I mean? So I feel like you have to be okay with not being liked by some of these folks. It's okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna tell you a secret, guys. You're gonna survive. You're gonna survive. It's okay if they don't like you, but God has called you for a particular place, for a particular people. Listen to that, because success to God is not what it is to, Joe Schmo around the corner in that church, or Outreach Magazine, or any of these other magazines that are always highlighting the big, and big churches and things like that. The small churches, like my brother-in-law, who's a pastor on the Lower East Side, he always says, I'm okay being right here at this church. That is success to me. That I've been here for a long time and I've been pastoring these people. So, being able to be with the people and walk with them and caminando juntos with them, that is success to God. So I think you have to be okay with that. Not being liked, being able to reimagine. It's all going to be specific and unique to you. And you also have to think, because in some of my research that I've done for Louisville, I was doing a research on women in ministry. One of the things that has come up is that also it's okay to not only reinvent yourself, but invent something new. So you can, I started Passion to Plant. It wasn't around, and I did it for me. I did it because I was going a little bit cuckoo. And I know that I needed to have that community of other planters and that we can get together and be able to let our hair down and be honest and not walk on eggshells and not feel like, oh my God, if I say something, I'm going to offend. And then, it ended up being that a lot of other people felt the same. And we're in year 5 now.
Oh, great. You mentioned walking away from what does not suit you. And I think that's a strategy. When things are not functioning, why do we stay to get beat up? Or why do we stay to continue to be pushed away when we know it doesn't suit us, right? It goes back to this issue of fear and not trusting that God is going to lead the way to the next one. And I just want to say, and opening this up, I'm going to go back to, I want you to talk about that, but it happens in the academy. Sometimes we're in institutions as a professor where we're miserable and we're treated horribly by our other colleagues. And we stay there because we're afraid of tenure or we're going to, and then we end up getting sick. We end up because our bodies don't forget, all of these microaggressions that we have to put up with constantly, the body doesn't forget. And this, when you say walk away from those situations that don't suit you, I think that's a strategy that we need as women, especially to think about. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I mean, gosh, I've walked away from so many things. Lord have mercy. And I think again that boldness to do that is when you're comfortable with who God called you to be. If you're still trying to fit into spaces and still trying to be liked, and that's your priority, or trying to climb a certain ladder, or trying to get to that cover or whatever of a magazine, all the different things again that people tell us is success. If you're still trying to do that, you ain't gonna walk away. You're going to take all the licks. You're going to take them all. You're going to be like, yes, can I have some more? Because you feel that, I personally, again, talking from my own story, that do you trust God? Do you trust God in the tomorrow? Because if you trust God in the tomorrow, you'll be able to walk away and know, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I know who I serve and he has it all planned out. And the creator knows what he's doing. So I feel like if you trust God, you will, and again, doing it afraid, because a lot of times we don't even know what's going to happen. Yeah. Even now with all these, mandates, executive orders, I know plenty of people right now that are going to have a forced move, So I think sometimes, we have to look at the signals, look at the signs, and is God telling you right now, stop, contorting yourself to fit into spaces that you really are not supposed to be in anymore.
Let me just give you, you'll go to the last one, because I wanted also for you to share what you said you were ready to share tonight, that you wrote, I'm in love with Bad Bunny's latest album. I love it because he was unapologetically Boricua. And for me, that was yet another sign that we need to be authentic to who we are. And the people who will love us, and those who don't never were our people. Want to just unpack that?
First of all, come on, put it in the chat. Do you love Bad Bunny? Have you listened to Bad Bunny? If you haven't, you have to. That album is fire. And the reason for that is because what I mentioned, he wasn't trying to please gringos. He wasn't. That's it. He said, he was in an interview, they asked him, what, they don't understand you. How do you feel about that? He was like, no es pa ello. So he knew his people, and we have to know our people. We have to stop trying to fit into these places when they're not our people, so know who you're called to. And when you're called, you know what language to speak. So his album was fire because he reminded us about the history, colonialism. He reminded us that life is short. And I resonated with that because of the death of my son. He's debe tirar más foto. Come on, don't worry. People tell us all the time, oh, all these photos. No, take the pictures, because you don't know what's going to happen in your life, and those people, the people that you love, are not going to be there anymore. And again, be in love with who God made you to be. Again, I am older, but I was starting to love myself already in my 30s. Okay, but ahora I'm going to hit the 60 mark this year. And let me tell you, no me pueden decir nada. No me pueden decir nada. Because I love who I am. I love who God created me to be. And all the experiences that I went through made me who I am. So that's another thing. Like, sometimes we're ashamed of the things that have happened. Don't be ashamed. Things happen in life, but they're all meant to form us. That's part of our spiritual formation, if you allow it to be. Because sometimes people, again, put everything in silos. We don't have to work like that. Mira, embrace it all. Cry, that's okay too, to cry too. But embrace who God created you to be, because Bad Bunny has showed us the way. El Profeta Bad Bunny has showed us the way to be authentically ourselves. Yeah. And if people don't understand us, that's okay, because that means that it's not our people.
That's right. And to be authentic to ourselves is also to honor God, because we are then authentic to what God did and the creation that God made in us. And I think that sometimes we've had this, again, another false picture of how to please God. And it is in being ourselves, our true selves, that we also honor God, because then we are being exactly what God wants us to be. I think that's so important. I wanted you to share with us that you said you wrote something today, because I want to leave a little bit of time for some questions and that. So if you want to share and tell us a little bit about what you're going to do.
Sure. So a friend of mine, Agustin Aquiles, he's been pulling out the creative in me. When I was in high school, I was really creative. I was dancing and writing plays and all that stuff. And then eventually I kind of like leaned in more into the academic side and kind of left that to the side. But he's been pulling that out of me. So in Alabama, I recently was with him. I did 3 spoken words. And as I was talking with Doctora about this chat, I came across Ada Maria Isasi Diaz in La Lucha. And in there, she talks about to name oneself is one of the most powerful acts any person can do.
That's right.
We're going through all this craziness in the United States where they're telling us who we are. So I titled this, I Name Myself.
All right.
They've called us by many names: illegal, unworthy, too loud, too much. They shape their mouths around syllables that do not belong to us and expect us to bow to their definition. But I name myself. In this Trump era, they try to box us in, stamp us with fear, rewrite our story with a pen dipped in lies. But I hold the ink. I write my script. My name is resilience. My name is freedom. My name is God is with me, and I will not be erased. They see us and call us borderline, but God says that we are boundless. They say that we're invisible, but the Almighty says that we are the apple of his eye. They say you don't belong, but the heavens declare you are chosen. I name myself daughter of justice, child of revolution, a voice that cannot be silenced. I name myself past, present, and future all in one. The prayer of my ancestors, the echo of my abuela's faith, the seed of a tomorrow that they don't get to define. I choose how I move in this world, not bowed, not broken, not apologizing for the space that I take. I walk in the full weight of my calling, feet planted, heart steady, hands lifted, knowing I am more than a label, more than a census check mark, more than what they call me in their fear, for I am more than a conqueror. I am more than they imagine. I am named by God, and that is power, because I name myself.
Santo, santo, santo. Thank you. Wow. How powerful. How powerful. Wow. Just, yeah. So, especially for times as these. Times as these, to be able to name ourselves. God give us the strength to name ourselves and not be afraid. Not be afraid, God. Not be afraid to name ourselves because we are the apple of your eye. Wow, powerful is what a movement of the Spirit. I hope you're all out there feeling it because I feel it. It's a movement of the Spirit going on here because God is with us. God is always with us. And God will never leave us. No importa lo que diga el viejo Trump, God is always with us because we will name ourselves. Muchas gracias, hermana querida. Si pudiera darte un beso, te lo daría. Te mando un beso grande. Do we have any? This is too much. I am. Boy, thank you, Lord. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Gracias, Señor. Tantas cosas buenas que vienen. That's why we can never be alone. We have to be in conjunto. We need one another. Nobody, if you're journeying alone out there, you're not going to survive. You need to be in community. And God is providing us with community. So look for it. Búsquenlo. Búsquenlo. Don't be out there by yourselves. We need one another because then everyone has the gifts. Right here with Liz, we see the gifts that come tonight to feed our souls and to heal us and to bring us God's word. And we're grateful for that. Do we have any questions? I don't know how this is going to work. Do we have questions tonight or how does this is going to, this is our first time, so you have to deal with us here as we try to get this. How do we do the questions?
Yes, I can read the questions in the Q&A box that you see at the bottom there.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Siobhan is asking, what is giving you hope today? What can we as Latina pastors / leaders hold on to as we move into rougher waters?
I think we, like Doctora said, being able to find each other, don't be alone. We have each other. There's this book called Sisterhood Heals, and she says that every time women gather together, the world heals a little bit more, So we have each other, and I think we have to let go of the pride, and the hope is in each other, and being able to gather to restore the hope in each of us. When one is down, the other one is up. We could lift each other. So we shouldn't be doing this alone. And if anybody's wearing la máscara to try to look like they're all, stoic and they don't need anybody, well then, that's a situation that we need to look at because we need each other. And the hope that they have is that we don't lean on each other.
Right. Do we have something else? Another question?
Yes. Someone put in, I am Puerto Rican, an executive director for a nonprofit for women who are and were victims of domestic violence. I've been assisting women of assistant pastors, et cetera, with moving them to living free from abuse. What is the key to speaking on domestic violence within the church? When I speak on this, I am called a feminist, but those men can do what they want. So how can I speak in the church?
Okay, first of all, I'm not a domestic violence expert, but I know what it is because my mom was a domestic violence abuser. A victim.
Survivor.
Yes, survivor. So, I have stories about that. But I think one is education. In our company, Urban Strategies, we have a program called Iglesia Segura, and they start with the leaders of the church. It's in El Salvador, and they're trying to bring it over here. But education is really important because if the pastors and the leaders believe it's okay, it's going to just permeate the whole community. So education is always an answer to helping to deal with situations like this. But speaking on it, I don't know your context or where you're from, but I would say connect with the organizations that are doing these kind of trainings in churches and see if you could bring it to your church. But if there's a lot of obstacles and barriers to learning, again, I would go back to what I said earlier. You may want to question if that's the right space for you.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think that there are situations in churches that are deadly. They're deadly. And you said walk away. I think walking away is something. And walking away, there's nothing wrong with it. Sometimes we think that it's failure, but it isn't. It's survival. It's a strategy of resilience to be able to say, esto no sirve, esto no funciona. And the playing with words. That's why I talked about at the beginning, feminista. Oh, Yeah, so, I mean, ¿qué es lo que voy a hacer? No puedo ser machista porque soy mujer, even though, yes, that can happen, right? But yes, this idea of walking away is very powerful. I think that we need to, and it goes back to what you were saying, do we trust in the call and we trust the journey that God has laid out for us enough to be able to walk away? And it's not easy. I mean, I have done that. I have said this is not going to work. This school is not functioning for me. This is not a place where I feel healthy. I need to leave and ask God, please open a door because I need, I really need to be healthy. I need to be able to function, and I think that we need to do that. Anything else? Do we have any other questions that we have? Anything else that you'd like to say in closing as we come to the final moments as we bring this conversation to a close?
Yeah, I mean, I want to just say too that that's also tied to theology because we're told that
Yeah,
suffering is, next to godliness too,
yeah,
and that we're supposed to do this. So again, looking at theology is really important. But I would say to everyone that's listening, first of all, you are loved, and I know that right now we are in some crazy times, and there may be fear and angst about what's coming up next. Maybe some of us are already suffering from whiplash from all the different executive orders that have been done. And there's a lot of things happening in our Latino communities. Our church is already reporting that people are not showing up to church even. So I just want to encourage you that even though we don't know what's going to happen, we know that we have a God that's going to walk with us. And
así
he's
mismo.
community. He's given us each other. So let's tap into the Lord, the Spirit, because I remember Elizabeth Conde Frazier in her book about Latina Evangelicals, she said, anger and tears create the space for the work of the Spirit. And so we could be angry. It's okay to be
Yeah,
angry. And we could cry because it's okay to have those emotions. We know people that are dealing with this, even if we're not. But let us tap into the Spirit of God and let us tap into each other. If we can do that, our ancestors have shown us, we have gone through stuff before. We will make it through again. But let's learn from the stories and the lessons of the past. We don't have to do this alone. We can do this together. So drop the performances and the máscaras and whatever. Reach out to a sister, say, hey, can I have some cafecito with you? Or do a virtual cafecito. Do something like what Doctora's doing with this. Gather some people together. We're going to need each other. We're going to need our own bohios and hush harbors where we can feel safe and talk about the things that we're experiencing and all the microaggressions out there. We can do this. We don't need to have anything fancy and formal. We could just get together and be of support to one another. But there's hope because we are people of hope. We serve a God that gives hope. So, but don't be without hope.
yeah. The fact that we come from a community of resilience, that we come from a community that has come this far despite conquering, despite slavery, despite all of the things that have happened to us, the rejection by the church, I mean, everything that has the erasure from history. Y aquí estamos, y estamos aquí por una razón. We're here for a reason. God has put us here for a reason. I always think about one of my favorite stories is Esther, right? And she's trying to pass, right? And she changes her name and she wants to pass and she ends up in the king's chambers. And then Mordecai comes and ruins everything and says, wait a minute, who knows, right? If it's for a time such as this. And this is the time, 2025, this is the time. And God needs to remind us that for a time such as this, we've been called. Liz, muchas gracias. Thank you so much for bearing your heart, for sharing your stories, for chatting with me. For your honesty.
Thank you so much for the
and sharing your wonderful words. You have lifted a burden from my heart. These have been difficult days for me as I look and I think about all the work that we need to do, the HSP needs to do, and I want to encourage everyone out there today who's been listening and been a part of us. Join us. Join the work that we're doing. Join the work that Liz is doing. Look up her website. See what she's doing. Connect. The Foundation for DJ, all of these pieces that you can do and contribute. Think about the HSP, the programs that we have, what we're doing. If you're in seminary, the summer session that you can join us. We have all kinds of activities happening. Next month, our exchange on February 25th. Remember, it's always the last Tuesday of the month. We'll have Altagracia Perez Bullard The Episcopal tradition is next month. Another wonderful conversation. Join us. Tell your friends to join us. Vamos a hablar. Let's chat. And let's chat about hope. Let's chat about resilience. Let's chat about God calling us and about us naming ourselves and helping our community to do what needs to be done. And read. Learn your history. We have to be real clear about what history teaches us. And we have to be clear what the lessons of history mean for the future of our community and for the future of our call. And as Liz reminded us all, we are all loved. We are all important. We are all needed. Any last words, Liz, before we say goodnight? Y un abrazo grandote para ti, y un beso grande.
No, I just, again, thank you for the invitation. I'm honored that you had me be your first. Thank you so much. And to everyone, just remember, again, we are people of hope. So even though we fall 7 times, we stand up 8.
Muchas gracias, hermana. Muchas gracias, hermana. Un cariño grande. Support the HSP, everybody, on social media. Keep track of what we're doing. Remember that we are working there, haciendo teología latinamente, supporting women like Liz and others, and join us in the work that we do. Support us and follow us so that we can be part of what you are and what you're doing. Let us know what's happening. Let me know what's happening. Send me an email. I always love to hear about your work. No, le pedimos a Dios que nos lleve con paz. Le pedimos a Dios que nos lleve con su bendición. Le pedimos a Dios que nos dé gracia, paciencia, gozo, esperanza, una sonrisa y nos ayude a hacer el trabajo que tiene que hacerse para el día de hoy. Go in peace, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. There's blessings in all that you touch and all that you do. And we'll see you guys next month. Que Dios los bendiga a todos. Adelante, pueblo de Dios. Adelante.
God bless everybody.